Dinosaurs have many interesting names, but how do dinosaurs get their names? Often they are named after the person who discovered them, their physical features, or they just caused so many problems for their discoverers that they literally got named the Irritator. But quite often, dinosaurs are named after the place where they were found, and some might even be named after your country. Let's start in North America. First off, in the United States, the country itself does not have a dinosaur named after it, but many states do, including Montana with Montana Ceratops, which was one of the smaller ceratopsians. The Dakotas gave us the Dakota Raptor, one of the largest raptors ever. Utah actually has two, with Utah Raptor, the other largest raptor ever, and Utah Ceratops. Alaska got Alaskacephaly, and there's also Coahuila Ceratops for this state in Mexico. And then there's Denverosaurus, named for the city of Denver in Colorado. Then we get to Canada, but more specifically the province of Alberta. And this place isn't called the dinosaur capital of the world for nothing, as there are 5 dinosaurs that bear the name of this province, including Albertosaurus, which is a smaller cousin of the T-Rex, Albertoceratops, which had a large bony ridge on its snout instead of a horn like most of the ceratopsians. Then we get Albertonicus, which is actually one of the smallest dinosaurs ever found in North America. Then we also have Albertovenator, which is named after the Albertan paleontologist Philip J. Curie. And then finally there's Albertonectes, that's not actually a dinosaur, but a plesiosaur that lived in the late Cretaceous period. But we're not done with Alberta yet, because our capital city of Edmonton also has 2 dinosaurs named after it, Edmontosaurus and Edmontonia, both of which have been discovered within the city in the river valley, with one site having over 900 different specimens cataloged. And if you want to see more on the dinosaurs and the fossils found here in Alberta, I just spent 10 days in the Alberta Badlands, and we found some pretty interesting things there. So you can go check that out on my channel. But anyways, there are also a couple dinosaurs in North America that aren't named for countries, but for other places, such as Appalachiosaurus, named for the Appalachian Mountains, and there's Judiceratops, named for the Judith River in Montana. The next dinosaur is Coloradosaurus, and take a guess where this is from. Coloradosaurus. You'd probably think it was named after the state of Colorado, right? Well, you'd be wrong, because if you guessed the Colorado Formation in Argentina, then you would be correct. And yes, okay, this isn't technically named after a country or like a state or something, but I thought it'd be kind of funny to trick you guys with that, so yeah. But some dinosaurs that are actually named for countries in South America are, for instance, Brazilo-Titan. And despite having the word Titan in its name, it was actually on the smaller side for sauropods. But one dinosaur that was most definitely not on the small side was Argentinosaurus, one of, if not the largest land animal to ever walk this planet. And this sauropod was huge, reaching lengths of up to 30 to 40 meters. And there was also Chileosaurus, and this wasn't a giant like the other two, but a small herbivorous dinosaur from Chile. Again, there are some dinosaurs or other creatures named for places in South America that aren't countries, such as Panamericanosaurus, which is a massive sauropod named for the American continents themselves. There's also Santanadactylus, Santanaraptor, and Santanashelys that are all named for the Santana Formation in Brazil. Plus, the Andesosaurus is named for the Andes Mountains that run from the northern parts of Colombia all the way down to the southern tip of Chile. And finally, there's Gondwanatitan, named for the supercontinent that used to include Africa, Australia, Antarctica, and of course, South America, where this animal was discovered. And before we continue, if you're still watching, then you probably are enjoying this content. And if so, why not subscribe? That way you don't miss out on more cool videos coming up. Thanks. The next continent is Europe, with Hungarosaurus, quite obviously named for the country of Hungary. This was a large nodosaur from the late Cretaceous period, and this was actually the only dinosaur that I could find that was named after a country in Europe. But if you know of any more, please don't hesitate to tell me in the comments. But in Romania, there's Hatzegopteryx, which was one of, if not the largest pterosaur to ever exist, and they're named after the Hatzeg Basin, which at the time they lived was actually a series of islands. And if you remember, also in the Badlands series, I talked about island syndrome on one of the episodes. That's why they were so big. And anyways, there are also 2 dinosaurs named for the continent of Europe itself, Europelta and Europatsosaurus, meaning Europe's shield and reptile from Europe respectively. In Asia, there are only a few countries that I could find that had dinosaurs named after them, one of them being Japan, with honestly way more than I expected. There's Fukuyosaurus, Fukuyaraptor, Fukuyotitan, Fukuyuvenator, Fukuypteryx, and Koshosaurus. Sorry if I mispronounced any of those. All named after the city of Fukui and the Koshai region that the city is in. But then we get to China, and oh boy, where do I even start? Because in China, there are over 24 different dinosaurs named after the country itself, its different provinces and regions within, or even a couple of cities. and I do not have time to talk about all of those today. But if you guys want, I can make another video on that another day, so just let me know in the comments. But some important ones to note are Sinosauropteryx, which is actually the first ever non-avian dinosaur, that means dinosaurs that aren't birds, to be discovered with feathers, proving that dinosaurs developed feathers not just for flight, but for other purposes too. And this dinosaur is named for the country of China. The prefix Sino means China. Another really cool dinosaur worth mentioning is the Mamenchisaurus, named after the region of Mamenchi, and this was one of the longest sauropods ever discovered. Aside from these, there's the Gobisaurus, named for the Gobi Desert in China and Mongolia. Next, we head to Africa, where a few countries actually have dinosaurs named after them, one of them being Egypt with Egyptosaurus. This was a pretty large titanosaur reaching lengths of up to 49 feet, which is about as long as a basketball court is wide. The first ever fossils were discovered by German paleontologist Ernst Stromer in 1932. The fossils were stored in Munich and were unfortunately destroyed during an Allied bombing raid in World War II. Nigersaurus is another interesting dinosaur named for the country of Niger. This dinosaur actually has over 500 teeth in its mouth, and each only lasts about 14 days, which is insane. And there's the Lesotosaurus, named for the small South African country of Lesotho. And another dinosaur found in Niger is the Afrovenator, a large and agile predator from the late Jurassic period named for the continent as a whole. Up next are our final two continents, Oceania and Antarctica. In Australia, there is the Austrosaurus, and there are actually a couple of dinosaurs that have the word Austro in their name, and that's because this is the Latin word for south. But most of these were found in Africa or South America, and, well, obviously they're not named for Australia. But this dinosaur was found in Australia, and this is actually one of the earliest forms of Titanosaur, showing a link between the other Gondwanian continents. And while researching for Antarctica as well, I ran into the same issue I did with Australia, with many dinosaurs sharing the name Antarctic, despite not being found in Antarctica, just being found super south. But one dinosaur, Antarcticopelta, was actually found on an Antarctic island, and so I can include it in this video. But yes, believe it or not, the Antarctic used to be a warm and humid environment back in the Mesozoic, able to support large reptilian life. And there's one dinosaur that isn't named for a place in Australia, but I thought it was a cool story, so I'll share it here. So Qantassaurus is named for the Australian airline Qantas, as a thank you for their support in transporting dinosaur fossils in the 1990s. So as you can see, dinosaurs really are named after just about everything, from mountains and deserts to cities, countries, and even airlines. Which kind of makes me wonder, what other things are dinosaurs or even other animals named after? If you guys are interested, I can make a whole other video on this topic again, as this was a pretty interesting video to make. And if I said your country, let me know in the comments which dinosaurs from where you live. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.